Devastated and spiraling. I mailed 35, found a condom wrapper in my wife's 34 car. Now what? We have been together for about 10 years and married for 6. We have no kids now, but we were planning to start trying pretty much now. We are both very active, going to the gym, eating healthy, and are both in relatively great shape. My wife is gorgeous with a phenomenal body, but I would probably consider myself maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10 on the attractiveness scale. I realize that, but we've always had a really strong relationship. We started as great friends, realized we were just right for each other, and that developed into true romantic love and devotion. The sex was always fantastic. There were never any issues there with quality or frequency. I was washing my wife's car, as I do pretty often. In the course of cleaning the interior, I found an open, empty condom wrapper under her passenger seat. We don't use condoms since she had always been on birth control. I am driving myself insane with all the stories and scenarios running through my brain. She spends a lot of time at the gym, working with weights and doing her cardio, like 3 hours, 4 days a week. So there are frequent times when we are apart. She has never given me a reason to suspect she has been unfaithful. I know I have to confront her, but I'm scared to death of what might be the truth. She is my world, and I can't imagine starting a family with anyone else. I'm afraid I'm going to break. Edit to add. Wow. You all are amazing. I am so touched by the DMs and heartfelt responses. I had no idea I would get so many responses so quickly. I wanted to add some details to save me from having to reply to all the common comments. My wife has never given me a reason to think she has cheated before this. She has always been loving and affectionate, and we were looking forward to starting a family very soon. Some have speculated that kids coming soon may have led her to one last fling. I don't know. Possibly. We are an open book to each other with our finances pretty much entirely tied up as one. She comes from a pretty upper middle class background. Her parents are very comfortable. I come from a home where my parents were fighting their own demons, and so I didn't get a lot of attention growing up. Not a criticism. It was easy to get lost in the shuffle of my parents' problems. We are cordial but not super close. I am way closer to her family, and I love her mom and dad and younger sister. Financially, we are fine. Together, we make about $150K per year. She makes $60K as a law firm assistant. I make $90K as an auto technician. We own a house together that we were able to purchase with a down payment from her family. If worst comes to worst, I have no interest in fighting for that money. It is theirs, and they can have it back if we end up selling the house. Some have commented about the amount of time she is at the gym. We go to separate gyms. She gets off work at 4 and goes straight to the gym where she does a class, then works out with weights and the cardio on the treadmill. I was never suspicious of the time she spends there. By the time she gets home, I am already there, and she jumps directly in the shower, and then we make dinner together and hang out. As far as a lawyer or an investigator, there's no way I could do that in secret with the way we manage our finances. So that's out for now. Someone explained to me how to get detailed phone records from Visible, so that's my next step. I will get the records when I have some time to myself and see if there is a number that she's in contact with a lot that I do recognize. I'll try to figure out where to go from there and let you all know. Update. Lots of folks asked for an update. Not a whole lot to say, but things are getting interesting. I am shaking as I type this. Thanks to everyone in the comments and the DMs for the empathy and well wishes. A lot of good tips and advice too. Man, I would hate to piss some of you off. Some of you are vindictive. First off, I found a WRAPRE, not an actual used condom, so the suggestion of DNA testing was not useful. And thanks to user uhidono27 for the information about getting detailed phone records from Visible. Today at work, during some break time, I requested a download of the phone records, but it says the request could take up to 45 days. I can't wait that long. I also drove by her work on my lunch break. I don't know why or what I expected, but her car was there as it normally is. Lots of good advice. To track her, get a VAR, look at her phone without her knowing, hire an investigator, a lawyer, etc. I can't deal with this. I am taking the advice a lot of you had, and I'm just going to confront her today when she gets home. As some of you suggested, I plan to just put the condom wrapper on the table in plain sight and watch her body language. I am so scared and nervous, I am almost pissing my pants. I am really starting to expect the worst. For me, if she cheated, there is zero chance we will stay married. Zero. I don't care what excuses or reasons or whatever she has. I am 100% done. No therapy, no counseling, nothing. Can't believe I am typing this. It makes it seem real. I can't imagine her sucking dick and freaking some other guy or guys. That's an image I could never get out of my head for the rest of my life. As far as assets, we don't have a lot. We have a pretty nice house that her dad helped us pay for. I'm happy to let her have it with my fair share and pay back her father. Otherwise, it is bull crap like 2 cars, some furniture, and some decent savings that we have both contributed to. So I'm willing to split 50/50. The thought of divorce is burning a pit in my gut. I'll post again after I confront her. Either way, I think this thing comes to a conclusion tonight. Mini update. Okay, instead of sitting here pissing my pants, I wanted to just type a few more things to keep busy. I'm sitting here trying to find any other reason to doubt her. The wrapper, it was fairly pristine, not something stuck on a shoe or sitting in a parking lot. Dash cam. Yes, I've checked the dash cam footage. Nothing suspicious or out of the ordinary. Commutes to work, the gym, and home, maybe a stop or two for typical errands, grocery store, cleaners. Zero suspicious activity, but she knows there is a dash cam too, so who knows? Maybe she's just being really careful. The car, yes, we bought it used 2 years ago. It is in 2018 Infiniti Q60 Coupe. The cash is a 3.93. Cash flow is $117 a month and $5 per unit. Peace. It had an extremely small back seat. I can't imagine sex back there, but who knows what motivated people might be capable of. I clean and vacuum it at least once a month, so there is zero chance it has been there the whole time. Ironically, we usually wash the cars together, but this time I happen to be doing it alone. Had she been there, this whole thing would probably be over now. Her current state of relationship, it's really strong as far as I know. She comes home, we share a glass of wine while we make dinner together, talk about our day, cuddle on the couch if we watch a show. We really have what anyone from the outside would be jealous. No feelings of distance, no hiding of phone, and no drop-off in sex, which has always been and still is great. Her gym time, with as much as she does, it is really reasonable for her to spend 2.5 hours at the gym. I've gone with her. I've seen her work out. It's pretty extensive, and her body shows it. I am so proud of how great she looks and how she takes such good care of herself and encourages me and cares about our health. I've never been suspicious about it, maybe foolishly. Yes, she comes home and showers right away, but she's typically sweaty and feels gross. She doesn't avoid me when she walks in. She will typically come over and greet me with a kiss on the lips and then hit the shower. If she was just having sex with a side piece, I think she would be more discreet. We spend almost all of our time together on the weekends. Go for a jog, date nights, happy hour with friends, dinners with family, etc. She has a lot of girlfriends from work, and they sometimes go out for a girls' night like once every 2 months. But again, nothing suspicious. I see the credit card charges, so I don't believe she is hiding anything. And her girlfriends are all awesome, and I love hanging out with them and their husbands/boyfriends. I'm torn and getting nervous about talking to her tonight, but I got to get this over with. Sending you my army wife plus cheater. When I first joined the military, I was very naive. I actually believed the recruiters about many things without knowing the difference between doctrine, the way things should be, and reality, the way things are. So I believed that officers were the best and brightest college types who were aloof but nonetheless selflessly focused on mission. I also believed that non-commissioned officers were the most competent and capable soldiers who were promoted simply based on being the best that they could be. And finally, us soldiers could find family among our fellow soldiers who enlisted to support and defend the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I discovered in my first year that with few exceptions, none of these stereotypes were true. I had gotten married to my high school sweetheart who was a couple years younger than me, and I was anxious to prove myself as a soldier and a man. I was willing to volunteer for overseas assignments, war, and the toughest assignments. Having come from an impoverished background, the military was the best vehicle out of the ghetto and into the middle class. The sales pitch was if I took care of defending the United States, then the Army would take care of me and my family. That did not work out very well for me and my 19-year-old bride, BTW. All names have been changed. My initial military training included boot camp, airborne qualification, and ranger training. I checked a lot of blocks and was an official badass according to the U.S. Army. But rather than getting assigned as a member of the Special Operations Forces or the 82nd Airborne, I was sent overseas and assigned to a security detail that had nothing to do with being an elite warfighter, but more so to do with my ability as a natural-born leader of the Special Operations Forces. Luck of the draw. Without going into detail, the security job was 24 on and 24 off, followed by an 8-hour work schedule for 3 days. However, due to downsizing and the numerous conflicts overseas, the U.S. Army reduced our manpower from 5 shifts of personnel down to just 2. So rather than the promised work schedule, my peers and I worked 24 on duty, followed by 6 hours admin duty and 18 hours off duty, 365 days per year. Rather than 2,000 hours a year, we were working close to 5,000 hours annually. This is how I was unable to maintain my job and my wife during my first duty assignment in the military. She had a high school diploma, but no other special education or training. So while I was on shift, she spent May hours at the on-base recreation center surrounded by hundreds of other young soldiers. Erin 19 was a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed gal with a model's figure and a killer smile. She was the typical cheerleader in high school, but also smart as a whip. We planned on having her work on college classes while I brought home the bacon. My shifts were exhausting, and within the first few months, I was physically and psychologically damaged from the nonstop 24-hour shifts. By the time I got home, all I wanted was a hot meal and sleep. As newlyweds, we did have sex, generally 3 times a week, but I was so exhausted I would often immediately sleep right after, so Erin's eyes began to wander. She was taking some college courses, and overseas, it is not uncommon for officers to pick up extra cash by teaching NI classes as an adjunct professor. One such professor was an officer, an O3, who I will call Capt. Dustin. My wife would rave on and on about how smart Keith was and how she loved his classes. After hearing about how great this teacher was, I went to one of her classes and peeked through the window to see that her facial expression looked like she had a crush on him. When we eventually met, I had to address him as Captain Dustin, but she just called him Keith. I immediately felt uneasy about their relationship. This was not a good sign, and supervisors should at all times be on the lookout for kittens and concerned about their after-class activity. But the 24-hour shifts never ended. Toward the end of our time in this assignment, my wife asked for illegal separation. I suspected that it had to do with Captain Dustin, but without the financial means or the time to investigate, damn those 24-hour shifts, I simply signed the separation, sending her back home to the continental United States 6 months prior to my rotation. I later learned that my wife's request for legal separation coincided with Captain Dustin's rotation back to the States. I rotated out of that tour of duty 6 months later, and to my surprise, my wife appeared ready to renew our marriage. I loved her to death, and having been raised by a divorced mom, I never wanted a divorce. That was actually a life goal, is to stay married. So I took her back. Part of the reason she came back is that my mother-in-law shamed her into returning to me. So we had a new duty station and 8-hour days. I had gotten a few promotions, and by now we had enough disposable income to enjoy restaurants and date nights. One day, I came home early and heard the phone ring just as I walked in the house. This was prior to widespread use of cell phones, so we had a phone in the kitchen and one in the bedroom upstairs. My wife and I picked up the phone, and she said, "Hello, Keith." I was on the kitchen extension and immediately covered the receiver, so she did not know that I was listening. I had always suspected she cheated on me with Captain Dustin, and now I learned firsthand the extent of her betrayal, starting with "Can we talk?" and "I miss you," and some very spicy details about their year-long affair. Dustin had literally followed us to the new duty station. I did not have a recorder. If I had, maybe the evidence would have helped. But my wife closed the conversation with, "I love you," and she hung up the phone. I was crushed. Not one to hesitate, I confronted her immediately. "How long?" After a lot of tears, she admitted to sleeping with him when she was his student, the old teacher-student fantasy, and then renewing their affair after I came back to the USA. In less than 6 months after our marriage, I heard she made the jump. Why Dustin? She came up with a myriad of reasons. I was just a soldier making meager wages. He was a captain and had flight pay, which means I was in the bottom tier and he had a lot of money to burn. So she said he could take her restaurants, motels, and buy her gifts, whereas a junior guy I could barely cover rent and utilities. She was tired of being poor. As a typical guy, I wondered if he was better in bed or bigger or more exciting. She said his cock was not bigger, his muscles could not match mine, and he was good but not great in bed. I asked why. She said, "He makes me feel like a princess, but you are still a pauper." I immediately started to plan to get him. However, it would have to be a seamless operation. After all, a physical attack on a senior officer by a junior soldier would be punished by a courts-martial with possible jail time or worse. but I could not stand by and allow this 28-year-old creep to continue screwing my then 21-year-old wife. She constantly cried it was a mistake, I asked Aaron. It may have been a mistake when we were overseas due to my horrible schedule, but it was not a mistake when we returned to the USA. He pursued you after we ended our separation, and you spread your legs. She replied, but I came back to you. I replied, but you're still screwing him. This ended our intimate time together. I did not want his leftovers, so my disgust and lack of interest in my wife pushed her back into his arms. After a few weeks of tension, hate, and silence, she said, we need to talk. I agreed. She claimed that she had never denied me food, sex, and love while she was still sleeping with him. She claimed our marriage was her priority, and he was just sex, just fun, and just a way for her to feel special when I was otherwise not available. I agreed that my military duty made me unavailable overseas. The 24-hour shifts were debilitating, but we ended our legal separation when I came back to the States, and I was doing 8-hour shifts. How did that make me unavailable? I took her back because I was still crazy about my former cheerleader. She still looked like the hot-toned, spicy gal I married, but I was going crazy when I found out she was screwing him, despite my current availability, except for short-duration field training exercises, usually 1 week out of every 8. I was home every night. I later found that they were screwing during lunch hours and shacked up 24/7 at a motel whenever I was on the field maneuvers. I have to admit, her pussy would make any man go crazy. I told her I was going to fuck him up if she continued to see him. Within a week, I was on orders for 1 year unaccompanied tour overseas. I was heading for a combat zone, and she screwed me every night and morning until I left. In short, I did not have time to exact my revenge. While overseas, my wife of 2 years wrote, and I would write back. Back then, emails were not common, especially in a combat zone, so her letter took a week to come to me, and my letter took a week back to her. Essentially, I received and sent 24 letters over the course of a year. As soldiers rotated in and out of my unit, I heard stories of my wife hanging out at the officers and NCO club. No one offered proof, but the innuendo of her acting like a barfly made me crazy. I hear that she was sleeping with Captain Keith D., Captain Jeff C., Captain Tom R., and eventually a guy named Rick C. Based on the rumor mill, she went from a sweet young bride to a total slut. I planned to exact revenge. I could not wait to go on my mid-tour leave, served my 6 months, got to go home 2 weeks, and then return for another 6 months. When I went to buy my airline ticket, I discovered that then money I socked away in a savings account had already been withdrawn a month prior. So I planned to use my credit card only to discover it had been maxed out. I had 2 weeks leave, but no way to get back home. I managed to get to a phone and tried calling home every 2 mounts for the entire first day of leave. No answer. I tried again the next day and still no answer. So I wrote an angry letter asking where my ticket money was at and what the heck was going on with Keith, Jeff, Steve, and Tom. My savings and checking accounts were empty and my credit card was maxed out, so I went back to my unit and canceled my leave. I spent another 6 months on the front lines and volunteered for every dangerous mission that come up. I earned the respect of my fellow soldiers and gained a promotion that year. I finally flew home with a few new medals, a sense of accomplishment, and a desire for an immediate divorce. I had not gotten a letter in several months, so I knew it was over. When I got back to the USA, I encountered a pregnant wife. I had been gone 12 months, and she was 4 months pregnant. She did not know who the father was. After all, she was sleeping with more than one man. She claimed we can fix this, but I was not interested in being married to a whore. Some things cannot be fixed. Not only was my wife pregnant, but she also had a sexually transmitted disease, LTD, and pelvic inflammatory disease, PID. I immediately filed for divorce, and unfortunately our state did not recognize adultery as a reason for divorce. It was a no-fault state. Eventually we had a hearing, and while I did not have to pay alimony, I was saddled with child support payments, even though the child was not my own. In our state, if married to the mom, you were responsible for the kid no matter whether you were or were not biologically related. Nonetheless, I was divorced and felt free for the first time in 4 years. She had finished college while we were married, and unfortunately, I had co-signed her college loan, so I was stuck with that. I was stuck with the residual car payment and also with child support. I volunteered to return to the combat zone because I could get danger pay and 3 meals a day for free. 16 years later, her daughter wrote me a letter and I was thrilled. I was still in the army, but this was the first letter I had received from the child that I had financially supported for the past 16 years. In this letter, she said she would like to change her last name and be adopted by her mom's new husband. I had no biological connections to this child, so I wrote back and said, granted. With the adoption came an end to my child support payments as well, and I finally felt I could move on. Her mother had married one of her affair partners, Rick, and the child, who was not biologically mine, took his name, was legally adopted, and a few years later had Rick walk her down the aisle when she got married. I was not invited to her wedding, but so why did I write this? I just needed to get it off my chest. After 4 years of emotional turmoil and almost 2 decades of indentured servitude, I was finally a free man. I have often considered hunting down her various lovers and exacting revenge, but after the divorce, I simply concentrated on becoming the best person possible. I had earned a bachelor's and a master's, and eventually found a loyal wife, so mine was a happy ending. But it took almost 20 years to achieve. Why did I not exact revenge? In truth, no woman is worth jail time, and nothing short of extreme violence was worth my vengeance. I walked away from a disloyal slut, liar, thief, and into a successful military career despite my military superiors, who had zero ethics and no inhibition about screwing a junior soldier's wife. Ultimately, my journey reminds me that loyalty and integrity are priceless. Though it took nearly 2 decades, I found my happy ending and peace.